Hello and welcome to Hidden World. Tonight we are going to walk the streets of Manhattan and at the same time descend into the city that lives under those streets. We will move slowly and clearly, like a patient surveyor tracing a map. I will guide you through the tunnels that feed the city with water and steam, the ghost stations that sleep in the dark, the secret routes of the famous terminal, the rumors from the era of speakeasies, and the safe ways to see some of this world with your own eyes. Make yourself comfortable. Let the noise of the surface fade. Listen for the hum that rises from the ground. That sound is New York breathing through the layers below. Part 1. The second city beneath Manhattan, the giant water tunnels, and the city of steam. Imagine the island from above. Broad avenues, rows of towers, windows that glitter like scales of a river fish. Now imagine the island from the side, as if we could slice it open like an illustration in an old textbook. You would see bedrock and soil, and then a lattice of man-made veins. These veins carry drinking water from distant reservoirs to the kitchens and bathrooms of millions of people. They also carry steam that heats and cools buildings and turns a winter block into a place where a white plume rises straight into the cold air. This double system looks like something from a science fiction novel, but it is the daily life of the city. The drinking water does not start in Manhattan. It begins in protected valleys far to the north, where rain and snow gather behind old stone dams. For generations, New York has followed a simple principle. If you want to grow a city, you must first grow a river that comes to you. Aqueducts cross counties and pass under rivers. Then, beneath the streets of Manhattan, the water drops into tunnels cut through solid rock. Workers made those tunnels with drills and blasting and sweat. They cut shafts as deep as small skyscrapers turned upside down. At the bottom, they joined the main lines and built chambers with valves the size of cars. The water flows silently through this network, day and night. The system is so important that the city has spent decades building a new tunnel alongside the older ones so that flow can continue even when sections need repair. It is one of the longest and most expensive civic projects in the history of the city. The goal is simple. The tap should always work. If we could stand inside one of those rock tunnels and switch on a single work light, the scene would feel like a cathedral. The tunnel is round, smooth, and damp. On the walls you would see angle markers sprayed by engineers, and near the floor, a ribbon of water sliding past with steady force. Every so often, a shaft rises to the surface where a quiet building stands behind a fence. People pass those buildings without a second thought. They do not see the stairway that spirals down through rock. They do not hear the echo of a drop of water hitting stone. And that is the point. The water world under Manhattan is designed to be invisible and to be trusted. You only notice it when something is wrong, and the goal is to make sure that day never comes. Now listen for a different sound, a hiss that becomes a roar when a street valve opens. This is the city of steam. It does not boil in cauldrons like a fairy tale. It is an industrial network that runs beneath many avenues of Manhattan. Steam is generated at plants where water is heated until it is a white wind. The steam travels through steel pipes that are wrapped and insulated and set inside trenches. Buildings tap into that power to heat rooms and to drive absorption chillers that create cool air. It is an old idea that kept growing because it is efficient when many buildings stand close together. On a winter morning, you can see a metal chimney placed over a manhole and a white plume rising into the blue. People use it in movies to signal New York. Behind that simple image lies an entire system of pressure, valves, and careful maintenance. Engineers monitor temperature and flow. Crews replace sections of pipe. Sometimes the city closes a lane to protect a job site where workers stand inside a cave of their own making. They work with gloves and masks, and they listen to the pipes as if those pipes were living things. They are listening for the story the pipes tell. A small change in noise can signal stress. A slight rise in temperature can point to a missing piece of insulation. The system is powerful, so safety is everything. Water and steam are not romantic in the way lost stations are romantic, but they let the city wake up each morning and act like a city. If you were to draw a portrait of Manhattan as an organism, you would sketch arteries of water that never stop, and a second mesh that moves heat from one place to another. You could live your entire life in New York and never see either system directly. Yet the key to understanding the underground lies in this reality. The biggest tunnels are not secret because they belong to a spy story. They are secret because they are ordinary and critical, and the city guards them the way a body guards the heart. If you walk the island with this in mind, you start to notice the surface echoes of the hidden city. A small building with no windows and a thick door. A square patch of asphalt that looks newly laid in the middle of an old street. A low hum near a corner where you do not expect it. A mushroom of steam on a frozen afternoon. These are not clues to treasure. They are the alphabet of infrastructure. Each letter tells you the second city is alive beneath your feet. Part 2. Subway Ghosts. The closed City Hall station and the forgotten lines no one talks about. Now we step from utility to transit, from what feeds the city to what moves it. The New York subway is an underground country with its own rules and legends. You can stand at a platform on a busy morning and feel that country rush by. But there is another layer, the quiet one. It is made of stations that once welcomed riders and now sit behind walls, of short connections that led somewhere and then stopped, of tracks that lost their purpose when the map changed. This layer is what people mean when they talk about subway ghosts. The most famous of these ghosts is City Hall. The station opened in the early years of the system. It was built with care and pride. The designers wanted the first riders to feel that underground travel was not a sacrifice, but an advance. So they gave the station a graceful curve, skylights made of glass tiles, and chandeliers that floated like warm stars. The platform hugged the rails like a crescent moon. At the time, it was the southern end of the first line. Trains stopped, doors opened, and a new city began to move. Over time, the system grew. Cars grew longer. Platforms elsewhere were extended to meet demand, but City Hall was a tight curve with a short platform. The station became impractical. There was another station a short walk away that worked better for transfers. So City Hall closed. The line itself did not close. Trains still pass, looping through the station on their way back uptown. The result is a hidden theater of light and tile, where the audience is a small group of eyes on the last car if they are lucky and if the doors stay closed. The station is like a book in a locked case. You know the words are beautiful because others have said so, but you cannot turn the pages whenever you want. City Hall is not alone. There were stations such as Worth Street and 18th Street that lost their role when platforms at nearby stops were lengthened. There are upper levels and lower levels at some stations that hold track plans from past eras. You can find talk of doors in the walls of certain platforms that go nowhere useful today. Once they opened to a passage or a staircase that fell out of use. Sometimes a short track is still there to move trains around, just out of view. Sometimes it is locked in darkness and dust. People like these stories because they suggest time has layers. New York is young compared to ancient cities, yet it already has ruins. These are not marble temples, they are rooms of glazed tile and old lamps and numbers stenciled on steel. If you picture a city as a living thing, these are scars. They do not hurt the body. They remind it of what it went through to become what it is. When you ride a train across Manhattan, you are moving through an argument the city has had with itself for a century. Where should people change lines? Which streets deserve an express stop? How do you add capacity when everything is already in place? Each answer leaves a mark. Sometimes the mark is a new tunnel and a loud opening day. Sometimes it is a quiet, shuttered platform that waits in the dark like a memory. Part 3. VIP Passages of New York, the Secret Platform. Track 61 and the Secrets of Grand Central. Now we arrive at Grand Central Terminal, a building that is not simply a train hall, but a small city within a city. Marble, gold leaf, a ceiling painted with stars. Below all that beauty is a maze of rooms and corridors that keep the terminal alive. There are locker rooms and workshops, kitchens and storage areas, ducts and fan rooms, and electrical vaults that would make any engineer nod with respect. Somewhere in this complexity sits one of New York's most discussed rumors, the platform known as Track 61. The story goes like this. A private track under a famous hotel allowed very important people to arrive in secret. The most repeated name is that of a president who had trouble walking. The tale says a special rail car could be parked on the track. An elevator would carry a car from the train level up into the hotel. The guest would step into the car and be driven out a side door without anyone seeing them. This image has lived for decades because it has everything people love: power, secrecy, engineering, the terminal as a stage set for history. What is true is that the track exists under the hotel and there is a freight elevator near it. Photographs of an old armored rail car have circulated for years. What is not clear is how often any of this was used or for what purpose. Some historians suggest that the track served freight and that rare visits by important people were a convenient use of existing space. Others say the legend has grown beyond the facts. Either way, the fascination remains, and it tells us something about Grand Central. This terminal is not only a place where trains meet the city, it is also a fortress of services and decisions that must happen out of sight so that everything on the marble concourse feels like magic. There is more. Hidden below the concourse is a level that keeps the lights on. For years, it contained banks of machinery that converted power to the form needed by the rail system. People working there were warned to keep their work quiet because enemy agents might target those rooms in a time of war. The terminal also contains passages built to move people and goods without clogging the concourse. If you stand in the main hall and watch the rush, you forget that almost all the heavy work is happening below your feet. In a large public building, there are always shortcuts that staff use and doors that visitors never open. Some of these secrets are dull. Some are grand. A back corridor that moves a crowd from a platform to the street is dull until you realize it is the reason the main hall does not choke each evening. A short stair that leads a chef from a kitchen to a dining room is dull until you picture the dance that keeps a famous restaurant running on time. A quiet elevator behind a wall is dull until you imagine it carrying a guest who cannot climb stairs, which turns it into a lifeline rather than a curiosity. When we talk about VIP passages, we are really talking about design that treats the city as a complicated play. The audience sees the stage, the workers build the set, move the props, and keep the lights steady. In Grand Central, you can feel both parts of the play at once. The public part is the room everyone photographs. The private part is a web that makes the public part feel effortless. The fact that track 61 sits inside that web, whether used often or rarely, is proof that even legends have to hook into real engineering to survive this long. Part 4. Prohibition-Era Tunnels, Speakeasies, Bootleggers, and Criminal Passages, Myths versus Facts. Now we turn to the stories that grow in the dark. Every city collects rumors. Manhattan has more than most because the island is dense and the island is old in American terms. Prohibition made those rumors multiply. When the sale of alcohol became illegal, people did not suddenly lose their taste for a drink. They found doors behind bookstores and steps in the back of barbershops. They met in basements where a piano played quietly and a curtain hid a second room. Out of that time came the idea that the island is riddled with tunnels for smuggling. Some of those ideas are true in small ways. Many are embroidered by time. Let us start with what makes sense. Older buildings often had shared walls and sometimes shared basements. A landlord would connect two spaces to move goods without paying street labor. A theater might connect a neighboring storage room so the sets and costumes could pass out of sight. Hotels used service corridors to keep deliveries away from guests. When Prohibition arrived, these existing passages could be used for something else. They were never meant as long escape routes. They were short, quiet links that made daily business smoother. Illegal business simply borrowed them. There were also simple mechanical reasons to connect spaces: boilers and coal, ice and food, trash that needed to leave without crossing a lobby. The layout of a block could change. If a wall was opened for a renovation and then sealed decades later, the memory of that opening could turn into a legend about a tunnel that once ran to the river. It rarely did. It usually ran to the next lot. Then there is the romance of speakeasies. Today, many bars use the look and feel of that era as a theme. Hidden doors, antique lamps, menus written in scripts that pretend not to be menus at all. These places are legal. They sell the feeling of secrecy because the feeling is fun, but their design can confuse the story of real hidden rooms from the past. You see a modern fake bookcase that swings open, and it is easy to believe the city is full of such tricks that were actually used by criminals a century ago. In some cases, perhaps yes. In many cases, no. Draw a breath and think like a builder. A passage that serves a business needs to be safe and simple. It cannot cross property lines without permission. It cannot pass under a public street without a legal agreement. It cannot cut through a foundation without serious work. When you weigh all that, the number of true illegal tunnels shrinks. That does not make the era any less dramatic. Bootleggers did use creative routes. They ran liquor along the waterfront and used service entrances. They paid off the right people to look the other way. They built chutes inside walls to move bottles from one floor to another. They installed buzzers to shut lights and warn of raids. They ducked through kitchens. They squeezed through coal rooms. They did not need mile-long tunnels when a doorway and a short stair would do. What has survived is a mood. When you step into a dim basement on a narrow side street and the ceiling is low and the brick is old and there is a smell of dust, your mind begins to write scenes. A piano, a glass on a small table, a whisper about where to sit. The mood is powerful because it combines danger and comfort. That is why the stories last. They help us imagine not only crime, but also a city that can change its face in seconds. On the surface, a stiff collar and a strict law. Under the surface, a room where everyone is laughing and the music is soft. So what is myth and what is fact? Myth is the idea that there is a secret highway under Manhattan that once carried fleets of trucks for illegal booze. Fact is that there are countless short links and forgotten doors that tie basements together and made it easier to hide rather than to travel. Myth is that every old building hides a tunnel to the river. Fact is that many old buildings once had a direct chute to a coal storage vault near the curb. A century later, the bricked vault looks like the start of a tunnel to a creative eye. If you want to read the truth below a street, learn the ordinary functions of a building, and the mysteries will become clearer. Part 5. Go down legally where to see underground New York without breaking the rules tours museums maps. We have walked through systems and legends. Now let us end with a list of safe doors that anyone can open. The most welcoming door is a museum devoted to transit, set inside a retired station in Brooklyn. You can stand next to vintage cars from different decades. You can walk through them and hear how a floor creaks. You can look at old maps and see how the lines grew into the modern web. The best part is that you are standing inside the very bones of a station, so the curve of the ceiling and the smell of old paint tell their own story. Back in Manhattan, the Great Terminal offers tours that focus on architecture and on secret corners that are not always obvious. A guide can point to the small junctions where a decision was made long ago. You may walk a corridor that you have used many times and discover that it was built to solve a problem you never noticed. Some tours discuss the famous track under the hotel in a careful way. They explain how legends grow and how a rail yard works. They teach you to see service space as part of beauty, not as a threat to it. There are also tours that explore engineering on the surface and invite you to imagine the systems below. In some districts, the power company maintains small exhibits about how steam moves through the city. In other districts, civic groups talk about the hills and streams that used to cross Manhattan. They show maps where old waterways are drawn like veins. One of the joys of the island is that history is never only in a glass case. It is often mapped onto the streets you already know. You can stand at a corner and know that a brook once flowed here. If the day is quiet and rain has fallen, you might even hear a faint trickle in a storm drain. That is a direct line to the older island under the modern grid. If the subway is your passion, there are legal ways to view unusual parts of it during special events. The city sometimes runs nostalgia rides where vintage cars return to the tracks for a day. The sound of their motors and the feel of their seats are a gentle time machine. Riders of the regular system also pass through a few ghost spaces by accident. On the train that makes a downtown loop past the old City Hall, some riders can glimpse the station from the window when the train circles north again. Conductors sometimes ask passengers to remain on board while the train turns and to keep away from open doors. That is not a tour, but it is a moment that connects you to the early years. Several organizations produce maps that highlight lost streams, closed stations, or service tunnels that are part of public record. A map is not a key to a locked door. It is an index for the imagination. Bring one on a walk, and the city becomes transparent. You will notice design choices you missed before. A sharp bend in a street grid that once formed around a hill. A row of vents that hints at a wide tunnel below. A lonely gate with a number that points to a valve chamber for the water system. None of these places are attractions. They are reminders that the surface is only one chapter of a long book. One of the most useful steps you can take is to visit a branch library and ask for historic photographs of the block where you live or work. Librarians love this question. They will show you images of your corner when it looked different. If you are patient, you will likely find a photograph where a trench is open for a pipe or a track. That single image gives you proof that a hidden layer is not magic. It is the result of a plan and a budget, and a crew that gathered at 6 in the morning with coffee and went underground so that the rest of the city could drink water and ride trains and keep warm. Before we end, a word about respect. The underground is fascinating and curiosity is good, but there is an important line between learning and trespassing. The spaces we have discussed are hard-working parts of the city. Many are dangerous if you are not trained. They also carry responsibilities you cannot see from the sidewalk. If you want to learn more, use official tours, read public documents, look at maps in archives, and support the institutions that share this history. People keep this knowledge alive, and they need your help. When you step back onto the sidewalk after a day of thinking about the tunnels, the street looks new. The manhole cover is not a circle of iron anymore. It is a door to 1,000 kinds of work. The grate near the curb is not just a place to lose your keys. It is part of a river that has been taught to behave. The white plume on a winter day is not a trick for tourists. It is a sign that the heat in your apartment and the climate in a hospital are running as they should. The island under the island is not a single secret. It is many small truths placed close together. Some of them are grand, like the water tunnels that turn distant valleys into a tap. Some of them are quiet, like the unused curve at City Hall that glows in old photographs. Some are romantic, like the story of a private platform and a hidden elevator for a famous guest. Some are playful, like a door behind a bookshelf that now exists only to make a modern bar feel old. Some are practical, like a service corridor that keeps a crowd moving without a jam. Together, they form a second city that mirrors the first. Tonight, you walked through that mirror with me. We learned how the city drinks and breathes, how it moves, how it hides, and how it remembers. We learned that mysteries grow when ordinary work is hidden in the dark. We learned that the best way to see the underground is to respect it. The more you respect it, the more it reveals. Thank you for watching Hidden World. If you enjoyed this slow dive into the layers beneath Manhattan, let me know in the comments what you want to explore next. We can descend into other boroughs. We can follow the path of a forgotten stream. We can search for the tunnels that connect to history in other cities. For now, listen to the hum under the pavement as you walk home. That quiet sound is a reminder that the city is bigger than its skyline. The city continues below your feet, steady and patient, working for you while you sleep.